In today's world, most of us have become cyborgs. We can answer almost any given question within 30 seconds thanks to our connection to the internet. But our connection to this information could be much faster than using our awkward and slow fingertips, by using a high bandwidth brain-machine interface. I'm Flynn, and I chose to present this topic to you for the same reason that I became interested in it. Because of how far ahead Neuralink is with their BMIs, and they had to develop an insane robot to implant them. I'm in no way of an expert in the field of neuroscience, obviously, so I'll keep the information broad. I'm going to showcase Neuralink's work they published in their white paper released in 2019. This presentation will cover what Neuralink is, an overview of their procedure, and dive into detail about the robot. Neuralink is a company that's developing high bandwidth brain-machine interfaces to connect humans and computers. The BMI is a system which reads brain signals, examines them, and turns them into useful instructions to control external devices such as wheelchairs and robotic arms. The purpose of BMIs is to restore functionality to people disabled by paralysis and other neuromuscular disorders such as cerebral palsy. Neuralink aims to do this and take it even further. An example of an existing BMI comes from BrainGate, which is a research group who is also developing brain-machine interfaces. They demonstrated theirs in a clinical trial which used a Utah array, a small 100-channel chip which allowed the patient to control a robotic arm just by thinking about it. Before getting into any neuroscience, I'll first show you a clip taken from Neuralink's launch event, outlining some parts of the brain, just for context.
Of nearly 100 billion cells called neurons. Neurons come in many complex shapes, but generally they have a dendritic arbor, a cell body called a soma, and an axon. The neurons of your brain connect to form a large network through axon-dendrite junctions called synapses. At these connection points, neurons communicate with each other using chemical signals called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are released from the end of an axon in response to an electrical spike called an action potential. When a cell receives enough of the right kind of neurotransmitter input, a chain reaction is triggered that causes an action potential to fire, and the neuron to in turn relay messages to its own downstream synapses. Action potentials produce an electric field that spreads from the neuron and can be detected by placing electrodes nearby, allowing recording of the information represented by a neuron.
Neuralink's purpose is to firstly understand and treat brain disorders. To treat brain disorders, you first need to gather information about the brain. Researchers from the State University of New Jersey found that the action potentials or spikes, peak amplitude detection, occurs at under 50 microns away from the neuron. This has prompted Neuralink to develop an invasive BMI, which means that the electrodes are placed directly into their brain. With their micro electrodes and custom electronics, Neuralink has demonstrated real-time neuron monitoring in rats, and they're well on their way to stimulating neurons. This is the feedback part of the BMI system. Secondly, Neuralink's purpose is to preserve and enhance your own brain. This relates back to the cyborgism. It is to add a digital layer directly to our brain instead of accessing it using devices such as smartphones and computers through our senses and motor functions. Thirdly, to create a well-aligned future. In Elon Musk's eyes, who is the founder of Neuralink, this is to have the possibility of a symbiotic relationship with artificial intelligence rather than being left behind. In just 2 years, Neuralink is now well on their way to clinical trials. Their developed sensor array has 3,072 electrodes spread across 96 threads with simultaneously capable stimulation and spike detection on each electrode. And the chip is only 4mm by 5mm in size. They're seeking FDA approval for these this year, however they'll be a long process. So how are they proposing to implant them? The guiding principle in Neuralink is safety. Every design decision made is filtered through the question of whether this decision will make the team at Neuralink more likely to have this procedure done or recommend it to friends and family. Although at first their BMI will only be used to treat patients severely affected by brain disorders, they hope to make it safe enough for people to get it done just because they want to. The flexible polymer probes that get implanted into the brain were made as small as possible to displace as little brain tissue as possible and to avoid musculature within the brain. To give you a sense of scale, they have a thickness much thinner than that of a strand of human hair. This is so small that neurosurgeons can't implant them without help. So Neuralink built a tool called the Robotic Electrode Inserter, which I'll get into more later on. Neuralink aims for their procedure to end up like laser eye surgery, with no hospital stays, short procedures, small scars, and allowing the patients to keep their hair. The initial procedures may resemble the traditional ones, which are less pleasant, but they hope to simplify it greatly. Using the words of Dr. Matt McDougall, the head neurosurgeon at Neuralink, the simplified procedure should start with an injection of local anesthetic, a very small opening in the skin, a painless opening in the skull below, a quick, precise placement of threads into the cortex, and they'll fill the hole in the skull with a sensor, allowing the scalp to be closed over it. Behind the ear, they'll make a small incision to insert the coil. Lastly, they'll tunnel tiny wires underneath the scalp to connect the sensors to the coil. The robotic electrode inserter plays a crucial role in the surgery. So let's dive deeper into what it is and how it operates. The robotic electrode inserter is a 3 degree of freedom robot with a workspace volume measuring 400 by 400 by 150mm. It has a global accuracy of 10 micrometers. It's capable of rapidly and reliably inserting 6 threads and therefore 192 electrodes per minute. The end effector holds what they call a needle pincher cartridge, or an NPC. This penny gives you a sense of size of the needle. The needle's purpose is to both hook into the probe loops for transport and to penetrate the brain tissue. It's driven by a linear motor and rapidly contract with an acceleration of 30,000 millimeters per second squared to encourage the separation of the probe and from the needle. The pincher is made of 50 micrometer diameter tungsten wire with a bend at the tip, and it's driven both axially and rotationally. Its purpose is to support the probes during transport and to guide the threads so that they follow the correct path during insertion. The insertion process can be automated, but at this stage the neurosurgeon will have full control of the robotic electrode inserter. I'll give a quick warning for those sensitive to the sight of brains and blood vessels. The neurosurgeon can point out where each probe will be placed, allowing them to easily avoid blood vessels on the surface of the brain. You can see in the video that the robot can track and adjust for the movement of the brain, which can be caused by breathing and heart beating. For successful operation and to provide the views shown, an imaging stack is also mounted on the inserter head, which has many cameras for various important views such as close-ups of the needle during insertion and a wide view of the surgical field. It also features a light module with various independent wavelengths to illuminate certain parts of the threads, enabling computer vision to guide the end effector. In conclusion, Neuralink has only been around 2 years, yet they've made some serious progress on their BMI system. Their work is important for understanding and treating brain disorders and to safeguard us from the eventual rise of artificial intelligence. The BMI implant procedure will be quick and easy, and their robot is extremely advantageous for this. Keep an eye out for them in the headlines and check out their paper or launch video if you're interested.